And as was mentioned earlier in the show, we are getting an update, courtesy of BAHA, talking about the situation of health of cattle. And joining us for this conversation, we have Dr. Carlos Itza, who is the Project Director for Belize National Sanitary Cattle Plan, and Dr. Miguel de Paz, who is the Technical Director of Animal Health Services. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
So we wanted to start off by just finding out what your individual roles are in terms of working with the National Sanitary Cattle Plan. Let's go ahead with that.
Yes, well, the project recently concluded. We are just preparing a final report for the EU, which is the final report of the whole sweep that we did. Basically, the two results we were looking for is that we wanted to declare the country free of brucellosis and tuberculosis and setting up a traceability system. We can inform that we have achieved basically the two results, but what is pending is more declaring the country free of tuberculosis, which we have a plan that we need to test for 2 additional years. We have devised a process in which we don't have to test the whole cattle population, but we will just be testing a representative sample of the cattle population. And therefore we'll be providing a protocol which will indicate what are the herds that will be going under testing. Basically, so that's the announcement I wanted to make. We are also preparing legislation to declare the country free of brucellosis, and that process has started now. Hopefully we will have a fast process of passing the legislation. Of course it has to go through its process now, and we are waiting that.
What is brucellosis?
Brucellosis is a cattle disease, but it can also be transmitted to humans. We want to make sure that milk is pasteurized, and it's more an occupational disease. People that do slaughtering of cattle could get infected. People that drink unpasteurized milk could get infected. But mostly it's a cattle disease, and it affects production. In other words, it does cause abortion in cattle, and it would reduce production greatly.
Now, when we're talking about animal health in general, and you focus on the cattle industry, immediately people think that it's primarily for exportation purposes. Is that necessarily the case? The project has as its objective to declare the country free of these 2 diseases. The important things here is that the diseases are both diseases that can affect humans, and they affect the production of the livestock. But also we had an agreement with Mexico in which we had to meet some conditions for us to export cattle to be slaughtered. So it's a twofold.
Yeah. Now, I think that is a broader part of the conversation that William is getting at, looking at what are the checks and balances in place to ensure that when a cattle is processed for consumption, be it the milk or the meat itself, what are the particular standards that have to be met, even for local consumption? And I know that's where BAHA's role is absolutely crucial. Or
a protocol, as you said, right?
Right. BAHA is the entity, along with the Ministry of Health, that has the mandate to do meat inspection. So we do it along with the Ministry of Health. We do the larger facilities. We have a department by the name of Food Safety Department, in which there are inspectors at the bigger slaughter facilities. They do inspection to ensure that what human consume is safe and would not affect human health and life. But at the same time, it's a point in which we can detect diseases. So again, it's twofold. For the wholesomeness of the meat, the milk, and it's a point of detecting a disease, a condition. So it's twofold, and you want to have You want to make sure that the national population is safe, and not only for export. Despite us not exporting, it is as important to conduct a meat inspection.
And when you talk about issues like this, because do we have a certification program developed at this point, or is that something that we're working on? You know, in a lot of other places, you do have a stamp from their animal health.
Okay.
Are we going in that direction? Where are we with regards to that?
I wanted to mention now that the whole intention is indeed to declare the whole country free, and that in itself requires the different years of testing that we have to do. Of course, when a farm is tested in the ground, field test, we have a certain now form that is produced by an authorized veterinary officer, and then from there samples of that farm is sent to the lab, BAHA laboratory at Central Farm, who conducts testing to also declare that the farm is free, not from only visual, but also a laboratory is confirming that there were blood samples taken. Once a farm has passed through the process of field testing, lab testing, there is a next process where if he conducts 2 consecutive tests, then we issue what is called a free herd certificate. That certificate is provided by BAHA, and of course the authorized personnel there. No? Once a farm has a free herd certificate, that means that farm can commercialize or can sell freely within the country, but also it's ready, prepared for export. No? I guess that I don't know if you want to expand on it.
Yeah, that's only talking to tuberculosis and brucellosis when we speak about the free herd certificate. But like I said before, we do have the inspectors there to make sure that everything else is in order, and that the meat that you consume and the milk that you drink is safe.
Or even the handlers who come in contact with the animals.
Yes.
Let's talk about the recent issue, which is the rabies and the blackleg disease. We know that the current situation is that you're asking farmers to invest in vaccinating their cattle, specifically to prevent the spread of these particular diseases. What is the situation at this point in time?
Yeah, over the last 3 weeks, we have been receiving notification from farmers that animals have become ill and they have experienced deaths also. And so we did the investigation in 3 districts. This is affecting 3 districts: the Cayo district, Orange Walk, and Toledo district. Samples taken from animals in Cayo and Orange Walk have tested positive for rabies. Those in Toledo, which is the larger number of deaths, we have ruled out rabies. Nevertheless, we highly suspect a bacterial disease by the name of blackleg. These 2 diseases are diseases that you can prevent. The farmer can do annual vaccination and then there is no problem. But our farmer seems to be more reactive than proactive. And so that's the message we want to get out there for farmers to vaccinate their animals.
It's not mandatory for them to do so?
It's not mandatory.
Okay,
it's
so
not mandatory.
it's a choice that an investment that they make in their cattle.
They need to do that investment, and rabies is a serious fatal disease.
Rabies leads to death.
100%. I think there is 1 case of 1 human ever surviving rabies.
It's also zoonotic as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be transmitted from animals to humans, yes.
Okay.
So that's the message we want to get out there, that the farmers can prevent this disease or these diseases by vaccinating. So we're having 2 different situations. In down south, we have not confirmed rabies, and we highly suspect the bacterial disease by the name of blackleg. That disease, though, does not affect human. Blackleg does not affect human, but it causes death in young animals and even in older animals.
Now, when you talk, I want to go back to the whole rabies conversation, because very often people think of it more, you know, among dogs and something else, you know. We don't think of it when we're discussing cattle. So how was it discovered, and why the move by BAHA, for example, to get people on board in dealing with this?
We have reported rabies in different species. It's few years that would go silent. Yeah. This year, it has been more pronounced. We're having more cases than usual.
Specifically in cattle or in multiple animals?
Well, this year we're seeing it more in cattle. Previous years we have reported it in foxes, cats, dogs. In the early 80s, there were rabies in humans here in Belize. Ooh. Okay, there was at least 2 cases of rabies in the 80s. So, yeah, it affects various species. It really affects all mammals. It can be divided into 2 groups. There's aerial rabies, the one transmitted by bats, and there's the terrestrial rabies, the one transmitted by foxes, raccoons, dogs. Yeah, but it's a fatal disease, and we have to work along with other ministries, for example, with the Ministry of Health, to combat this disease. But farmers can play an important role by vaccinating the animals, and the vaccine is fairly cheap.
How much is it?
It would range depending on where you are because of distance and transportation. It could range about between $5 and $7 Belize dollars to do a cattle.
But if you have a sizable herd, then that's when it.
But it's relative, right? Because if you lose one animal,
what is the cost of one
you lose
right.
one animal, you're losing $3,000. A 1,000-pound animal could value $3,000. So why not invest that $5? Yeah.
Is it typical that farmers would vaccinate their cattle? And it seems to just be a slacking off in terms of the maintenance program for their own herd? Or is this a new direction that we're moving farmers into where the encouragement is to vaccinate?
Few farmers do vaccinate on a regular basis, on an annual basis, having a good health management. So they do vaccinate. But the tendency is that it's until there is an outbreak that you react. So that is the case. We need for farmers to do it more on an annual basis. If this was being done, for example, in the South, we would not have this current situation.
Now, when you're talking about certain diseases impacting herds, the public immediately becomes a little bit concerned or worried about it. What does this mean for me if I'm a consumer of beef?
Yeah, there's no human health implication when it comes to blackleg, but rabies, there's human implication in that you can get infected with rabies if you have contact with the live animal and the secretion from that live animal where you have the virus. For example, the saliva of that cattle. The person wanting to treat the cattle, the owner of the cattle thinking that that animal has an obstruction in the throat would interfere with the animal mouth and could get infected. So that's where the risk lies with the farmer, the veterinarian, a person at the slaughter facility handling that live animal could get infected with rabies. If we talk about dog rabies, then human can become exposed by a bite. And it's always fatal once you get rabies. Incubation period could vary. If a person gets exposed, then we liaise with the Ministry of Health, and that person would get a post-exposure treatment, and that person would not get infected or become ill. So the risk is with that live animal and that person handling the live animal. But in terms of human consuming meat, there has never been, that's not the mode of transmission for that disease.
Dr. De Paz, before we get people extremely concerned, let's talk about what numbers we're talking about for rabies. In Cayo and Orange Walk, you said that there are more cases than you typically see, but you are simply advising people at this point in time, which gives the impression that perhaps it's not a very large problem, but one that needs to be contained.
That's correct. Rabies, although it's a fatal disease, the morbidity means the way in which it spread is not a disease that spreads like wildfire. If we talk about foot and mouth disease, which Belize does not have, that's a disease that spreads like wildfire. If you have an infected animal, the herd becomes infected. With rabies, if you have 100 heads of animal and you have rabies, the highest number of animal that will become infected will be 5 out of 100. So it's like a 5%. It's not a wildfire disease. So in total, we have 4 positive diagnoses, 4 positive cases. Because that's the dynamics of that disease. So
there are 4 cases at this point.
4 positive cases that we have identified.
And what is done with the animals when it's confirmed that they have rabies?
Animals are destroyed. You get rid of that animal by burial. You dig a hole, bury it, and you cover it. Or by burning, by incineration. And we advise the same for blackleg.
Now, is there a time-sensitive kind of thing right now why you've taken up your efforts to really get people on board in terms of rabies and the blackleg?
This year is different than other years. We're getting lots of call, and because of all the deaths that is happening down south, we've mentioned about 16 heads down south. So it's more than the usual than the previous years. And then we've had all the reports from Cayo and Orange Walk. So there has been more notification, and I strongly believe that we need to tell farmers what to do, how to react. In other words, we want them to vaccinate their animals against these 2 diseases.
So the vaccination works for blackleg as well?
As well, yeah. There's a bacterin to vaccinate versus blackleg.
Okay. So the encouragement is that the farmers vaccinate for both rabies and blackleg.
And what's the cost of the blackleg?
The blackleg is cheaper. I think it could run somewhere $2 or $3 per animal, maybe even less.
So essentially, and I think what you said is key. When you look at the value of 1 cow and what that loss may mean for an individual farmer, it is obviously, it makes more sense to get the cattle vaccinated.
Yes.
In terms of looking at other areas, do you now start surveillance in other areas just to ensure that there isn't blackleg or rabies in the other parts of the country?
There's diseases that we do surveillance for because you can detect it in the blood by doing tests, serology. But these diseases are acute diseases. The farmer don't see these animals ill. Until acute, it hits them and they die within 24 hours, 48 hours, you have a dead animal. So it's not a disease that we have an active surveillance for, but rather we respond to the call from the farmer.
So let's go through the symptoms that farmers can look for in case they don't know. Okay,
like I said, it's an acute disease, so usually they would not see signs, but if they get to see signs, we're talking blackleg here. If they get to see signs, they would see some lameness. Most of the time, it's a young, pretty animal that dies. And when the animal is dead, there is swelling on the bigger muscle parts of the body of that animal, which is the neck, the shoulder, the leg. So that's where you would see the swelling. There's some exudate from the nostrils, some froth with some blood. At times you will see that head turn backwards, epistotomos, they refer that to. So those are the signs. That swelling, the veterinarian can pick up an animal that has died from blackleg because of that characteristic swelling. It's like sand in an air sac. We call it a crepitant. It has a crepitant feeling with that sand and air sac.
So as you pointed out, you wouldn't be able to tell that it's blackleg till after the animal dies.
Because usually it's acute, it kills fast, and you find a dead animal. Now in terms of rabies, rabies is a disease that affects the nervous system. So you have a nervous animal, an animal that has changed behavior, an aggressive animal. Nevertheless, it can be the other extreme in which the animal becomes docile, very docile. And so that animal salivates a lot when it has rabies because there is paralysis of the pharynx, of the throat. That animal cannot eat, that animal cannot drink, salivate, nervous behavior, twitching. So those are the clinical signs. Staggering, they eventually fall, they become recumbent, and that animal will die. And
it's best to isolate once you see those signs, I would imagine.
Isolation, and it's the same for dogs. I'm sure pet owners are looking at this show, and so rabies does affect cats and dogs, and you must get those species also vaccinated, and the signs will be nervous signs.
On an annual basis.
On an annual basis.
And we still have in place, because as you're talking about increased surveillance and getting people to be aware, do we also have restrictions in terms of movement of cattle in terms of the national program?
Well, I wanted to mention, because of the current traceability system we have in place, there is a system that is housed at BLPA, Belize Livestock Producer Association. They are basically the one managing what is called the Belize Livestock Registry. And this registry requires that when an animal dies, the farmer retains the ear tag, and that ear tag basically is forwarded to the BLR, who automatically eliminates the animal from the system. If it is not done, then we believe the animal is still living. And so when we conduct like a farm audit, we would still be imagining that that animal is alive. So we might have in our system 20 animals pertaining to this farm. When we go, it's only 10. Something is wrong there. And by the law, it means that the farmer is not complying because the two figures don't match. So that's, and therefore also is that because of that traceability system also, we believe that when we give free horse certificate in terms of tuberculosis and brucellosis, meaning that farm is free of those two diseases. And so therefore, where we don't have that case, then the animals cannot move from that farm because it puts at risk the remaining farms.
All right.
So how can farmers get in touch to find out more information?
Okay. Well, I wanted to mention that also the reason why I'm here because we are announcing the AGM, the annual general meeting of BLPA, happening on the 19th of March. We will have more information in relation to the diseases. We will have more information relating to the update more in detail of the cattle sweep project, how we plan to continue, and also what are many of the new services that are being offered by the Belize Livestock Producer Association. And that, of course, can only be more expanded because we are going to have booths of different areas where the farmer will get better updated. Also, we are currently running meetings, what we call cattle community meetings with farmers that are owners of cattle. We are updating them precisely on these issues, and also we are having better informed process as to how do we go from testing in a 4th and a 5th sweep, but only through what I mentioned of a protocol where we will be testing some of the cattle that is found in the areas that border with other countries, which are the cattle with the highest risk, and also other population of cattle that we need to maintain testing because we want to, now that we will be declaring the country free, we want to maintain that status. And we want to reach the status of also free herd on tuberculosis. I wanted to also mention that Belize, as I understand it, might be one of the unique country in the Central American bloc that would have this status, the only status of brucellosis free. And now if we also do tuberculosis, what I learned from the Mexican experts is that they have taken about 25 years to do what we have done in basically 3 years with the cattle sector here.
And with it all around us, it means you have to be extra vigilant.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and we hope that farmers have been able to understand the importance of, one, reporting livestock, but also being able to vaccinate as well. All right? We're going to go ahead and take a break.
And when we come back, it'll be to talk about the Belize Coast Guard Wonder Woman Challenge. Don't go anywhere. Open Your Eyes continues after these messages.